You're listening to Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. On each episode, we sit down with key industry experts to discover more about what's happening in the world of learning and development, from current trends and insights to the most valuable lessons learned along the way. Join us for a fresh perspective on all things training and the best direction forward.
Welcome to Learning Leader Spotlight, where we interview the learning leaders of today to help the learning leaders of tomorrow. I'm your guest host, Tracy D. Lufkin, and I'm a relationship manager with Training Pros, the sponsor of this podcast. Training Pros is a learning and development contract staffing company. We like to say, when you have more projects than people, let us help you find the best consultant to start your project with confidence. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Alissa Weiher, Senior Director of Org Development, Engagement, and Retention at UCHealth. I first met Alissa at the ATD International Conference event last May, where she was hosting, or I should say facilitating, a session with one of her colleagues. And I took away some invaluable insights and just knew that she brings a wealth of knowledge about our industry and where we're headed. So I'm excited to dive into today's conversation. Alissa, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tracy D. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Let's start by giving our audience a quick overview of what you do at UCHealth.
So really simply, I know, grow, move, and engage talent throughout the organization. So if I think about the organizational development side, it's everything from hire to retire and developing leaders, coaching, really everything in between. And on the employee experience side, all of the listening that we do, our onboarding, exit, engagement, recognition activities and programs that we manage, employee events. So it's really the employee experience, soup to nuts is everything that I and my team do.
I love that. Hire to retire. That's great.
Yes.
And everything in between. So, your work at UCHealth, I think, is so crucial in an industry where continuous learning directly impacts patient care. So let's take a step back. And what first drew you into the world of L&D?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was a bank teller, and I remember I was in university and I wanted to be a teacher. And I went to my first teller training and I was like, this is kind of cool. There are teachers in corporation. And I thought maybe I want to do that one day. And it was about 5 years later and an opportunity opened. We were acquiring a bank down in Florida. And I had been doing on-the-job training through all the acquisitions we were doing for tellers, for branch managers, office managers. And I really was enjoying it. And I thought, why not? I'm going to raise my hand. And yeah, picked up, moved from Ohio down to Florida, took my first job as a teller trainer, and started working my way up through the bank in different types of learning and development roles, and moved through some different industries. And here we are. And it's now been 20 years that I have been in the learning and development field.
Wow, isn't it crazy how time flies and you start in one area and it just kind of, tends to grow to where you need to be next.
I know. And when I started that, it was when you think about teller training, it's very tactical. It's like, here's how you process the transaction. And that's where I started. And now it's so much working with executives and leadership development. And how do you really connect the dots and move through strategic influence of L&D? And you still need that tactical piece, but really looking at that evolution of where I started versus where I am today, it still fascinates me to look back on it. And I tell people I haven't worked a day in the last 20 years because I love what I get to do.
Oh, and it sounds like it when you talk about it, and you can definitely hear it in your voice. And I agree, when you get to that area where you're at with the executives and the strategic level, it's so much more rewarding and so much more impactful too.
Yeah. I agree.
So speaking of impactful, what are the most impactful changes that you've seen in L&D in the last few years?
It's interesting because I do think there are some things that it feels like they continuously repeat themselves in terms of there's this new technology, we're going with microlearning, we're going with AI, and there's constantly something. And so when I think about that question, I don't know whether or not it's about a change in L&D or if it's more so about a change in how I operate within L&D. But I think it's more about the bigger role we play as it relates to the larger talent strategy. And when I think about that, I think sometimes we think about L&D, we come in and we're the ones who really help to help others to develop the skills, the knowledge that they need to go out and be successful. But what I really come to appreciate is it's so much more than that, because you really have to have a strong partnership with talent acquisition to understand how accessible is this skill, this knowledge that we need out there in the market. Can we recruit the talent that we need in certain areas to help us to build that through acquisition, or do we need to start from the ground up? So how do we take a step back and really look at our succession plan and think about what are those competencies we're looking to build for the future? What do we need today? I mean, yes, we do need to know what we need to do today, but it is more about where are we heading and where are our talent pools? And then if we can take that step back and think about how do we collaborate in order to work through the approach that we take there, then we can start to say, well, how complex is this to develop for others? And, I am a huge fan of Korn Ferry's leadership or leadership architect, and really looking through and thinking about, you take a skill like strategic mindset, super difficult to develop. Networking, super complicated to develop. And sometimes you think really a hard one. And how much do we need to take the time, take a step back and say, how do we do this and how long will it take us versus where do we need to go out and fill some gaps to help us bridge the gap in the interim? So if you're looking at it just from a talent development standpoint, you're going to fail because you need to really round out a holistic approach and have those strong partnerships, have those regular conversations to really be looking at things more broadly. So I don't know that it's a change that I've seen or if it's a change in how I've approached it more so. But that's what I've seen the last few years.
Yeah, no, that's really, I think, very insightful with how you approach it. And some organizations don't have maybe the ability to collaborate with other departments. And you've really got to be able to advocate for that and be in a position to where you can to be successful.
Well, and I'd say it's even bigger than just talent acquisition because you think about things like the total rewards team. You think about the benefits that we provide and how do we use that? And so, a lot of organizations, we have tuition reimbursement. It's a great benefit. And it's pretty standard. Most organizations, they reimburse the $5,250 annually. But what if you can take a step back and think about those types of opportunities that you have and say, what if this is something we need to build? This is the capability. We may not have the opportunity to develop it in-house as quickly as we need to, but can we sponsor that? Can we fund that? Even if it's not a university program, can we look at some funding that way and do some of our development using our compensation that we have for our tuition reimbursement? When we think about our total rewards and we think about how we're developing people, what are those other things we can be doing to help them engage with the resources that we have available, and recognizing that learning and having that opportunity to grow is a reward. It is something that we want to do. It's a benefit that people can join your organization and have a full career. And so how do we market it as part of that and not just separate, standalone? You have career development. It's really a big package.
It really is. And I think with the incoming generations coming in, they expect that, more of that, right? So being able to really look at that as a total package, I think is something
Oh,
that
absolutely.
yeah, definitely. So how do you, with that collaboration that you approach, how do you see that changing or maybe in general, where do you see the L&D space headed in the next, say, 5 years?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the two different questions there, two different answers are going through my mind there. So as I think about so I'm going to start with where I see talent development going. And I think, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about AI. We all are being impacted by it right now. And I think it's all a matter of how do you look at where does AI live? Is this something that your IT team is rolling out through your organization, or is it a strategic learning tool that you're leveraging? And I think about that in terms of the role redesigns that need to happen across organizations. We're all reading the news about the organizations that are laying off thousands of employees. And that's really hard because we talk about how AI is or is not going to affect jobs. The reality is it is affecting jobs. We're seeing it happen right in front of our faces. And so how do we take the step back and work with our organizations in advance to think about One, how do we integrate AI into the roles that we have and take the time to develop people? So before we eliminate their jobs, what are those things we're responsible for in terms of upskilling, reskilling, redeploying, and helping look at that from an intentional standpoint? Because it's not that we just need fewer FTE to do the work. How is the work changing and how do we redirect people into new opportunities? And let's be honest, we have all had AI hallucinate on us. In fact, I was talking to one of our instructional designers and we're going through this big learning governance project. And, she was working through something and, really good of let's use AI, let's use AI. So she's plugging it into AI and really looking at this program or this content that needed to be redesigned, refined, creating more consistency, simplicity. And what it spit out was it was garbage. It really was. We've all gone in and done something and you look at the output and it's just like, oh, yeah, no, that does not hit the mark. And so we have to remember there's a human element to this. And what the outputs from AI are often doing is interfacing with humans. And how do we make sure that that experience is what we want it to be, what we intend it to be? And the risk we have is sometimes we're going ahead, we're implementing something with AI and we're taking it at face value that it's developing what we want it to develop. I had to develop an icebreaker for a leadership session that somebody else was going to do that I was like handing something over to a leader. It makes my work more scalable when I have something that I'm like, well, I do this all the time, but I don't have it documented. I mean, some of us we're not documentation specialists. That's not why we are in this field, many of us. But so how do we use AI to start to create documentation, process flow for the work that we do so we can make it scalable? I'm working with an organization of over 36,000 employees. We are a small but mighty team of 14. And how do we make our work more scalable? And so I think about that and I think about how we use AI, but having to go back and test it and make sure it's all valid. But when I think about if I take a step back and think about the other part of your question and think about the intersection of talent development, talent acquisition, total rewards, I think it's about the data. And I think AI can help us with that data. What are we putting in? What are those pieces that we have? And what are the stories that we're not seeing? What are those connections we're not making? So I think about, what I have access to on my team, which is our onboarding survey, our exit survey, our employee engagement survey, our recognition platform utilization. Great, we can put all of that in. We have information of things like patient satisfaction, safety and quality, but there are recruiting metrics. Like we think about the talent that's coming in and applying for jobs. What can we distill from that? What are the benefits people are taking advantage of? So how do we put all of that type of information in and start to identify trends and themes and start to think about how we continue to evolve how we work together in the future? I mean, it's really fascinating where it can go. And I am the first to admit, I love data. I am really terrible with it. So I like working with somebody who understands what are we trying to pull out. So that way, when we move forward, it's really making the impact we want it to. And we've got the right sort of insight. But challenge the data. Don't just accept it on face value. And that's the other part we're going to have to remember to do as we're leveraging AI for things like this.
Agreed. Yeah, data is king. And if you've got the right data specialist that can help you pull that data and even using the AI to do a lot of that analysis for you as well. But that should be used to form all of your strategies and all your things for the next projects. And it's amazing how the number of people who don't actually use it to the level that they could.
Yeah, like I have days where I am all over it and then I'll go for a few days and I'm like, it's almost like I forget that I have this AI assistant here that can help me. And it's like, wait a minute, why it hasn't become a routine for me yet? Even though I'm thinking about it every day, I'm talking about it every day, there are things that all of a sudden I stop and I'm like, why didn't I use AI for that to see if it would have helped expedite it? How could it have been a thought partner to brainstorm with me and get creative? And sometimes it's what it comes up with is interesting to say the least. But there are other times it's like, oh gosh, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah. Or maybe it just gives you ideas that you can just kind of bounce off and go another direction too. So,
Yeah, it'll spark something that then leads to a new conversation with someone else. And I love the sparks that happen.
yeah, that's wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Alissa, with your many years, 20 years in this industry, I'm curious to know who has been your most influential professional mentor.
That is a tough question. I've been really fortunate to have a number over my career. And I'm gonna have to say it's a leader I worked for in my last organization. She was our vice president of legal, general counsel, and she took on leading our full HR function, talent development being part of that. And she was one that really helped me stretch and grow in different ways. So when I moved over to the team, I was reporting into the senior manager who reported directly to her. And when I started, then I moved into that role, had the opportunity to really grow, take on new stretch assignments. And I remember talking with her about my aspirations and what I was really looking to do. And she started to push me in taking on stretches that put me out of my comfort zone, where all of a sudden I wasn't coming in just to be the learning expert, but it was to play a strategic business role and to ask different questions. And I think that when I think back on it, not only did I get to do some things within the HR space, I got to go over to Australia and do a secondment in an area within HR that was a little bit different to me, support some talent acquisition stuff that wasn't in my wheelhouse. But the biggest one was when she asked me to be part of a strategic organizational redesign of our consumer sales team. And it was a team that had been redesigned and shifted their reporting structure. I want to say it was 5 times it was something like 4 or 5 years. It was a very short period of time that their reporting structure kept changing. And I wasn't going in to learn or to lead the learning piece of it. I was going in as a business partner. And I had to go back and have hard conversations with executives to push back on some of the changes that were initially being recommended. And one of them, I remember it was this, we have to move fast. We have to move fast. We're going to implement this at our sales meeting. And I kept going back and looking at the data that we had and kept going back and revisiting conversations I'd had with these team members over the years and thinking about how they approach change versus how we were approaching the change that they were about to experience. And she pushed me to go have the hard conversation with the executive sponsor on this about shifting our approach. And I remember walking into her office, the executive sponsor, and sitting down and, I'd like to ask you a few questions. I'm asking her. And she was like, I'm going to stop you right there for a moment. And I was like, uh-oh. And she just goes, are you trying to coach me on something right now? And I just took a deep breath and I was like, yes. And so we talked about change and we talked about how we approach it differently and recognizing where the team is and how we could take a more incremental approach to bring them along. Because if we implemented all of these changes right now, were we going to implement the right levels of leaders? Are we going to implement the right positions? What if we took this staggered approach and we went in a different direction? It wasn't about the learning. It was about the employee experience and it was about the change management. And that's when I started to realize I didn't have to be the expert in the consumer sale process. I had to be an expert in humans. And that's really our role, is to be an expert in humans. And I wouldn't have done that if it hadn't been for Liza. And Liza pushed me, when I was looking for those new challenges, and she's still the one I call today. When I'm facing a challenge, when I'm thinking about those next career steps, she's the first call that I make. And I haven't reported to her for 5 years. It was right after the pandemic that she shifted to a different position. And, these are the connections that stay strong for many, many years.
Yeah, that's wonderful to have that. And I love that to really focus on being an expert in humans and with humans. That's
Yeah, I go back to that all the time. It is, we're learning and development, but in many organizations, we're part of the people and culture function. And we have to remember to keep that core to what we do. And it's not that we don't need process and procedure. We do. We need to think about how it enables the person and does it help to move things forward? And so how do those things work and complement with each other?
Mhm. So how would you describe that skill? Like, what is that as in terms of a skill?
Um, that's a good question. Honestly, I look at it as learning agility. Um, it is about taking the information we know and understand, and we look at those different situations that we're going into. How does this work? How does this transcend with the people that we're working with? And I think about this, there's emotional factors, there are rational factors, there's like the mental components we have to navigate through. There's the change pieces we have to navigate through. And I think learning agility is so interesting because we've all had so many experiences in all of our work. And if we take that time to pause to say, how did this unfold in this situation? What about that can I bring forward? What about that would I repeat? What would I do differently? And if while we're doing that, we're consistently asking, what is the people experience? What is the human experience? What is the desired human outcome? What do we want our people to feel, to do, to think? And sometimes I think we shy away from that notion of feeling at work, but it's
Mhm.
such a big part of our life. And so how do we integrate that in a really healthy way? And at the end of the day, we're all going to have all kinds of feelings at work. If I just even look back at today, there was something that frustrated me. There was something I got really excited about. There was something where I screwed up royally and I had to apologize to someone on my team for something that I failed to be the leader they needed me to be when they needed direction on something because it was new to them. And I didn't do it. I totally missed the mark. And I had that epiphany. It was like, well, crap, I've got to take that step back and recognize where I can be better, and having that moment, owning that moment and talking through that experience. It's so huge. And if we talk through it and really start to express what we did and what we want to do differently in the future, we're more likely to do so. Um, so yeah, and I think it's all about learning agility.
Oh my gosh, I love that learning agility and just what you described from your day to day shows what a great leader you are to be able to have that learning agility. And I think it kind of rolls into the next question about, what do you think is the most important skill right now? And so I know learning agility is an important skill for you, but is there something else you would say would go along with that?
Yeah, I think what goes hand in hand in that is um, it's innovation. It is that willingness to take a step back and say, what can I do differently? And innovation, I think sometimes we think of innovation, it's about wild, sweeping changes, and it's not. It's those little nuanced adaptations. And I remember, gosh, it must have been, it was more than a decade ago. I was at an ATD forum event, and there was a keynote speaker, and he was talking about innovation. And what I remember him saying is, and we're going to go back in time a little bit, but remember when the iPod came out, and the iPod was so innovative. It was like you no longer have, I was going to say a mixed tape, but I guess we were on the mixed CDs by then. But all of a sudden I now have this music in my pocket, and it's now syncing with this library, and I'm pulling this all in. And this notion of, where it came from, Apple wasn't the first to do this. It was about how they tweaked it. And all of a sudden moving into the iPhone where your music is seamlessly integrated into your phone and it's one device. And now to where it's a library that is accessed and it's digital and it's not about importing your CDs. It's about all of that, how you continue to evolve over time with little tweaks and enhancements. That's innovation. And, I often joke that, I sometimes I feel like I'm the least innovative person in the room because what'll happen is someone will say something and I'm like, ooh, ooh, ooh. And then I'm like, I add a little something to it. And I oftentimes don't think about that as being innovative, yet it is. It's that moment of recognizing how we build off of other people's ideas. It's about the enhance, it's about the tweak, it's about the iteration and evolution. And if we can continue to innovate how we approach things based on the way our learners learn, if we can innovate based on how we experience the world around us, if we can innovate based on the technology we have access to, it's transformative.
Oh yes, it totally is. I still have my first iPod.
So do I. It sits there and it plays music for my dog. And
Right?
well, now it's my sister's dog. I lost a year ago, but that's it. Like when I leave the house, that's what plays, and there's the dog's playlist, and it still
Exactly.
sits there because there are times I don't know why I don't use another digital device, but I don't know. It just makes me happy.
It's easy. It's easy.
Sometimes we do what's comfortable,
Yes.
and it is a good reminder of, am I taking the time to stretch out of my comfort zone and learn something new? And I'll admit right now, we just got the new Outlook implemented, and it's like, do you want to go back to the old one? I'm like, right now, yes, I don't have time to learn this. And I was talking to someone on my team, and she was like, nope, I'm forcing myself into it. And I was like, yeah, I should go back and press that button, because there's never going to be a good time. And you have to, sometimes just experiencing it helps you make that transition. And actually, I think that's what I'm going to do after this call, is press that button to force myself into that discomfort, because when we're uncomfortable, we're learning and growing, and it's a good reminder.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, let's switch gears just a little bit and finish off with a couple of last questions. What is your favorite source for industry news and information?
You know, I mean, I don't know that I have a favorite, but I'm always a fan of all of the information from the Association of Talent Development.
Mhm.
I am constantly out there on their resources. If I'm thinking about my favorite podcast, the Learning Geeks, Jake, Dana, Bob, they are brilliant. And just the different things that they bring to light of what we're facing in the industry, they bring up stuff that sometimes I'm not even thinking about it. And other times I'm like, dear God, I've been trying to navigate this, and I've been thinking about this for months, and all of a sudden they're talking about it. But honestly, my favorite is my professional network. I am constantly talking to people at other organizations about what they're doing. And at the end of the day, all of us is smarter than any one of us. And by talking to other humans, the connection, I think that's the biggest differentiator for me in terms of where I get my best information and sources. Because if all of a sudden I'm reading something, but I talk to 5 other people, and those 5 other people are reading 3 other things, now I'm gathering that much more information in a much more compressed amount of time.
I would agree. I would agree. And you've been involved in a lot of the local events around here too, in the Denver market, especially ATD, Rocky Mountain chapter, and some other things. And so it's really great to be able to pick the brain of the folks that you're working with, and alongside the folks you're learning with.
I do love other humans.
So what is the one book that everyone, I know this is a hard one book that everyone who wants to move into L&D leadership should read?
All right, I'm going to say this, and I recognize it's going to sound biased, but it's called Leading the Learning Function. And I did write a chapter in the book. I make no royalties from the book, full disclosure. But it really is all about, if you're stepping into L&D leadership, what are those key things? As you're thinking through, things you have to do from a compliance standpoint, an operational standpoint. The chapter I wrote was really all about developing your team to develop others. And my whole philosophy is, we always talk about the cobbler's children wear no shoes. And we are the cobbler's children, but I think it should be the cobbler's children wear Jimmy shoes. We need to take care of ourselves, because if we don't invest in our own development and really grow ourselves, we're not going to elevate how we're developing others and growing them. And this book had so many stories, case studies. There are so many different contributors from different industries, different organizations, that really help make it real and practical based on the lived experiences of learning leaders. And that's what I love about this book. And it's been out for about 5 years now. And I gotta tell you, it's one that I've given to a number of folks. I was gonna say, I keep it on my bookshelf, except I actually just gave it to someone on my team to look at something last week. And I'm like, oh man, I don't have it to hold up. It's this yellow book, blue font, and I would have held it up and shown it to you. I was like, oh shoot, I don't have that right now. But that's the one I would recommend, Leading the Learning Function.
Leading the Learning Function. I wrote it down. That's one to definitely check out.
The editors are MJ Hall and Lale Patel.
Perfect. Thank you. That will be in our podcast notes too for people to find. So, well, thank you so much. I do want to, before we wrap up, I want to express my sincere thanks, and really really having this great conversation with you today is always enlightening. So thank you, Alissa.
Thank you, Tracy D. I appreciated the opportunity. It was fun chatting with you.
Great. Thank you. So as a token of our appreciation for being on the show, Training Pros will plant 5 trees in your name.
Oh,
Yes, we have a charity that we focus. Our charity initiative is focused on planting trees around the world. And today we've planted over 5,000 trees. So we'll be adding 5 more in your honor and sending you a certificate so you can see where they're growing at. And it's just a small
that's
way for us
awesome.
to
I
say
love
thank
that.
you. Yeah.
Well, thank
So
you.
thank you. Yes. I will wrap this up then and say thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks for joining us for the latest episode of Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. You'll find links in the show notes to any resources mentioned on today's show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review.